Welcome to the Bad Roman Podcast. On this show, we talk with veterans, community leaders, Christians and non-Christians as we explore the entanglement of Christians with the state. The Bad Roman Project was created out of the firm belief that as Christians, we are called to follow Christ, not the state. Here is your host, Craig Hargis.
Hey folks, throughout the course of this project, we have tried to make the case that we as Christians should be putting our trust in Christ and not the state. We still see to this day that the vast majority of professing Christians are seeking their freedom and safety by working through or with the state. But if we look at the teachings of Christ and the early church, then we see a whole different idea. Today, Jonathan Cannone joins us to talk about his article for thebadroman.com titled "The Dream of the City to Come. Do You Not Trust God?"
Let's go. Right. We'd rather serve God than serve Caesar, you feel me? Right. I'm just trying to live what he said. I'm just trying to live what he said. I ain't scared. I will take one to the head. Go ahead. So it's safe to say that I'm bad. So it's safe to say that I'm bad. So it's safe to say that I'm bad.
Jonathan, how you doing today?
Pretty good.
Awesome. So this is the first time on the show for you, and I'd like, if you don't mind, to give us a little bit of background of yourself so folks can get a little acquainted with you so they know who they're hearing from today. You know, the author behind this awesome article, and I really appreciate you writing it for us.
You want me to start like when I was born, or
No, whatever you feel comfortable telling us. It's all up to you.
Let's see. I studied history and political science in college for about 7 years. So I'm a construction worker, and I have 4 children and a wife. I live on a little farmette in Virginia, trying to raise food and teach kids how to live close to the earth. I have some chickens and some rabbits. That's pretty much what my wife and I bonded over, was growing vegetables, and it's more than a hobby. But how I pay the bills is building decks.
That's interesting because I like the idea of people getting back to that, just growing their own food. And to me, it seems like a way of trying to subvert the state without the state knowing you're subverting the state. You know, if you're feeding yourself and teaching your own kids, and you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I love that idea. How's that going? Are you kids? Do your kids hate you for teaching them yourselves, or are they cool with it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. We'll see how it goes. But the oldest one's 5. But you know,
Wow.
when he was 18 months old, we'd put him outside and say, "Go play, go play," and he'd like toddle over to the garden and weed the onions. And he knew the difference between weeding and onion, you know. And he'd pick rocks, put them in his little wheelbarrow, and I said, "Go play, have fun." And that's what he thought was fun. But you know, by the time he's 13, he might have a different idea of fun.
He's gonna be sick of weeding the garden and go picking through onions. He's gonna be like, "No, you go have fun."
Yeah.
I'm done having fun with you.
Yeah.
That's funny. That is so funny.
He'll be ordering DoorDash.
DoorDash has been when I first moved to Memphis, I had never heard of DoorDash, and I love Chinese food every once in a while, and I've had to stop eating because I eat so much of it.
Mm-hmm.
But when I found out, before I bought this house out here, when I found out I could have Chinese delivery to my house, it's like a whole new world opened up to me, and I was eating Chinese food all the time, and it was awful.
The future's not all bad.
Anyway, all right. So what I'd like to ask you is, you've been listening to our podcast or following our project for a little bit, I think, and I'm really kind of curious to what kind of inspired you to want to write for us and write this specific article.
Well, it's kind of what's already on my mind. We have a lot in common, and I've been writing for a number of years, sort of on religion and politics, all the things that help us get along better. But really, I'd say a lifelong obsession with the idea that Jesus' kingdom is eternal and everything else is temporary. Just growing in my understanding of that the older I get. But ever since I was a very small child, I really loved the stories that were sort of parables about the unchanging everlasting kingdom that was going to have Jesus as Lord. So at this point in my understanding, when I write about it, this is what it sounds like. I just got through teaching about 4 months of adult Sunday school at my church with an emphasis on the kingdom of God, different aspects of it, just going all through the scriptures and seeing what it says about the new world, the new heavens, the new earth, and us being new creations, and what some of the, if you look at the Sermon on the Mount, sort of how to live as members of that kingdom.
Do you ever get frustrated with fellow Christians or professing Christians? Because we've come to this realization that, okay, if we really want to see change in this world, we've got to get serious about following Jesus Christ. We have to get serious about him as our king, and no kings but Christ. But when you talk to other Christians about it, and we were talking about it before we started recording, you said, you're talking to somebody that is still like you were 10 years ago, and you're like, oh man, you're so far away from where I'm at right now. Do you get frustrated with them, or do you handle them with velvet gloves? How does that work? Because I try to, and then, but I can only go so far. They're like, listen, you're not getting it. I don't care that Donald Trump is better than Hillary Clinton or Joe Biden. I don't care. You do understand that he was complicit in the murder of children in Yemen. Have you ever heard of Yemen? Let's talk about Yemen. And they look at you with this blank stare, and then I realize that I'm coming on pretty strong, but I get frustrated because we're running out of time, man, and people are dying because of our belief in the state. As Christians, I think if the vast majority of people in this world claim Christianity, if they'd stop believing in the state and just follow Christ, we'd see so much difference. We wouldn't even need 100% following. You know what I'm saying? But do you ever find yourself getting frustrated with these folks? And I do, and if you're listening to this and I've been frustrated with you, I apologize, but it really is what it is to me at this point.
I mean, I remember what it was like. So, I was not where I'm at now 20 years ago, 15 years ago. My whole life changed about 10 years ago, or in a new way, in a fuller way. I just completely surrendered my life to God and said, you run things, I'm not good at it. But the long story short is people just drop me breadcrumbs all along the way. You just find a little hint here and a little clue there, and then you have a whole collection of clues, and you put them all together one day and it blows your mind. But if somebody says, like, what's the story of how you got to where you are today? I'd just be like, I don't know. And a lot of humor, I think, helped me understand, and then a lot of scripture. And when you run into a wise elder who is all excited about Jesus and all excited about the kingdom of God, and not that excited about what the world gets excited about, they just have a real gentle way of dropping you a breadcrumb, and you don't even know it. You don't even think about, like, oh, they're red pilling me hardcore, and this is a hard one to swallow. They just, it's in a spirit of humility and gentleness that really breaks through to me.
Yeah, I need to learn that tact. That's I don't have that tact, and I get, more often than not, I get more frustrated with myself because, like, man, you could have handled this a different way. Because like I said, I see everything in black and white. I can see everything. To me, everything is right in front of our face. It's almost like the state and corporate media is mocking us at this point. And I can see it so clear in my eyes. And I'm looking at the guy next to me. I was like, are you not seeing what's going on here? This guy at work the other day said, and this is, at the time of this recording, this is what, a week and a half into the Ukraine-Russia war. And this guy looked at me, goes, I talk about this all the time. The break room has a Fox News on, and they're talking about it constantly, 24 hours a day on Fox News. And he goes, man, they're really trying to get us into another war, aren't they? I said, come on. You're there. Yes, you're getting it. They really are trying to get us into another war because, and this is why it was a great opportunity for me to bring up Yemen, because the vast majority of the folks that I work with are Trump supporters, okay? Big fans of Trump. And I said, did you know that we've been doing this to Yemen for 7 years now? 7 years. And corporate media is not saying a freaking word about it. Why? Why? Let's talk about this. We're going to get into your article, I promise, but I love this conversation. And he looked at me and said, 7 years? I said, yeah. Barack Obama started this genocide with the Saudis as president, and Donald Trump continued it every day of his presidency. And then Biden talked about ending it. And guess what? Biden's talking about, increasing his support for the Saudis. And when you talk to folks, we call them normies, right? They look at you with this, like, it's like their eyes gloss over, but you can see the wheels in their head turning. And that's what I love. That's what I love.
Right. It gets in there. Whether or not they consciously admit it, it gets in there. And then just give it time for the seed to grow. But there's so much information, man. Like, it's hard to know where to start sometimes. Like, how do we start at the very beginning and say, like, all right, do you know about this, operation? Do you know about how this war started? Do you know about, I ask people all the time, do you know who Henry Kissinger is? It's sad. I wish if Elon Musk just invents one of those ports in the back of your head, you can just stick a USB drive in there, zip, there you go. But yeah, it's hard to get through when people have gone their whole life living in a culture. And here's what I was thinking while you were talking is a culture has so many moving parts to it, but basically we've made up our minds how we're going to live. Like, we're going to buy as much fuel as we're buying right now to get to where we need to go, no matter if it goes up to $8 a gallon, and we're going to get it the same way as we get it. And, we're going to eat what we're going to eat. We're going to buy it where we buy it. And no matter how high it gets, but no matter what the cost is, and we don't usually see the costs, we say, oh, this is cheap, I'm going to buy this because it's cheap. But the expense is somewhere else. But we've already made up our mind how we're going to live. And the narrative just fills in the gaps for us so that it makes it make sense. Because the way that we live is insane. Like, what we're doing to the earth is insane. What we're doing to third world countries is insane. What we're doing to ourselves is an insane way of living. But the stories that we tell ourselves, help us sleep at night. So one thing that, what I want to do for people is, especially people who have faith in Christ, is to take the words of Christ and his followers and say, this is the story. Get this one. Let's just marinate in it until it is your story. And it will change the way you live. Like, you'll start looking at what you do and what we do as a culture and say, this is insane. Like, this isn't what Jesus would do.
Can you imagine being alive at that time when Jesus was walking around? And do you ever think, and I do, I think about this quite a bit. Do you ever think Jesus was walking around with his head in his hands, just just shaking his head, thinking, what have y'all done? What are y'all doing? And now fast forward 2,000 plus years, look at what we're doing.
Yeah.
It's even on a grander scale than what was happening then, and I have to imagine sometimes he looks at us and just shakes his head.
Oh yeah.
He said, you're not getting it. You're not understanding it. Why aren't you getting it? And I wonder if Jesus gets frustrated with us, or he just continuously loves us constantly without getting frustrated.
Probably a little of both, but when he says he saw the multitudes, he had compassion on them. He said they're like sheep without a shepherd. I'm like, wow, that's not how I feel. I'm just like, hey, why are you stupid sheep?
Yeah.
Get a life, grow up. Why are you following me around for? He had compassion on them,
Yeah, we need to learn that tact, right? I think we can do it. There's some people that can do it. I've seen it. I've seen people that can handle folks in a way without getting so brash, I guess is the word I'm thinking of. But like Stephen from Anarcho-Christian, I watch him talk to folks and interact with folks online. And I've told him this before because when you listen to his podcast, he has a way of teaching that I'm very envious of. Him and I agree on pretty much everything. There's some things that would differ on a few, here and there. But when I listen to his podcast, he can sit there and just talk to you, and it feels like you're in a Sunday school class being taught something by somebody that knows what the hell they're talking about.
He can really break it down to its essential elements.
And to me, on the other hand, when I get somebody one-on-one, I'm like, are you not freaking getting it? It's right there in your freaking face. It's right there in your face, and it's right there. Come on, it says it right here in the red words of the Bible. It's right there. They wrote it for us. Hey, folks. Craig here, and I'd like to let y'all know we are always looking for writers to contribute to our blog. I don't care if you have any experience or not. 2 or 3 of our contributors had no prior experience writing, and it turns out they have a real knack for it. Our project coordinator helps them put the articles together, and she publishes them on our website and Facebook page, and you will also have the option to come on the show and go more in depth about your article. So if you like what we're doing at The Bad Roman and would like to try your hand at writing, then send us an email at thebadromanpodcast@gmail.com. We're having a blast with this project, and we would love for you to join us in helping promote it. Now back to the show. All right. What I'd like to do here is kind of start, we're going to fast forward a little bit in your article, but I love this part of it because it's something that we stress quite a bit is the no king but Christ. When you look at the nations of this world, the kingdoms of this world, and you see that Jesus wanted no part of it, and you realize that Jesus even acknowledged the fact who was behind these kingdoms, okay?
There you go.
And he said, in your argument, said, when Jesus or Satan's ability to offer all the riches and power in the world could only mean one thing, that they belong to him. Now, I love this because it's so true. And when you're talking to another Christian who still gets involved with the stuff, pushes for they're statist, okay? But they're Christians, because I've heard this more than once. If we get enough Christians in office, things will get better. But who's behind this? Who's behind this kingdom, and which kingdom are you claiming to be a part of? Which one you can't go both ways. It's one or the other. So let's talk about that a little bit. Is this something that kind of drove your article? Knowing who is actually behind these kingdoms.
Yeah. So if you ever watched The Matrix, and he says, I don't even see the code anymore. I just see blonde, brunette, redhead. And so like I don't even see the front runners, the Putins and the Bidens and the Trumps and the Winnie the Poohs, whatever his name is. It's like the gods that, that are in charge. And interesting, when Daniel was praying one time for an answer, and God sent, I think, Michael, one of the big guys, down to give him the answer. And it was like 3 weeks later. He says, Daniel, I came immediately, but I had to wrestle with the Prince of Persia. Like I ran into a little turbulence along the way. Sorry, I'm late. I mean, so the most powerful, archangels that God has, I don't remember which one it was actually, but he says he had to wrestle. I have a message for someone in your jurisdiction, and this principality is like, no, you're not getting through. And he has to wrestle with him for 3 weeks, So even, and it's complicated. I don't know how they all get along, or, how God convinces them to sometimes do what he says, or most of the time they don't. But you can tell them by their works. It's lying, stealing, destroying, murdering, and enslaving. And that's not anything like what my king does. So, you can tell them by their works who they work for.
When you're talking to these folks, and I always beat up Christians on this show, man. I make it a point to beat up Christians on this show. Because I think the vast majority of folks that are listening to us are going to be on the same page. But I like the fact that they can share this type of episode with their friends and family. Be like, hey, check this out, because these guys are talking about no king but Christ, and you're talking about no king but Trump as a Christian, or no king but Biden, whichever side you fall on. They're all the same to me. But do you ever want to grab them by their shirt collar and say, listen, man, Jesus said we belong to this kingdom. And I like what you said in this article. He was talking about to the Roman governor. He said, you say rightly that I am a king. Like, they recognized him as a king. Why don't we take that seriously enough as Christians? Because it still holds true today. He's still the king. I mean, he's still our king. I mean, he's still the king of even people that don't even believe in him. He's still their king. You know what I'm saying? But why don't we take that seriously enough?
Well, for one thing, Americans don't remember what a king is. So it's almost like using that analogy is, you have to work to get there. Like even the word Lord, like we don't even have lords. That was the language of people who had lords and kings and understood how much power they had. And at this point, we have like CEOs, oligarchs, and bureaucrats, and generals.
Let me hang on a second. When you say that Americans don't even know what it's like what it means to have a king, I think that actually they want a king.
Oh yeah,
because they're not actually voting. If we go back to I use this quite a bit when I'm talking to normies, is that because I can fall back on my understanding of the United States Constitution, like the original intent of the Constitution. They call us a democracy. We're not supposed to be a democracy. We're supposed to be a republic. But the way people publicize and talk about the next president, it's like they're wanting a king.
Oh yeah.
They're not wanting a representative. They're wanting a king to tell their enemy how to live, is what they're wanting to do. And guess what happens? They end up telling you how to live too. I mean, could you go back to Donald Trump and people praise him, but I'm like, you do understand that he violated his oath to the United States Constitution every day of his presidency. He was worse on gun rights than Barack Obama was. The Fourth Amendment didn't mean anything to him. He would love to sit in your living room and tell you exactly how to live, and you'd be all about it. Oh, I've got my king of my house. No, guess what? You're a Christian. You've already got a king.
That's right.
Hey, folks. Craig here again. As you know, this project is completely self-funded by me, and all profits go straight to charities here in Memphis. If you have a blog, a podcast, or a product that you would like to advertise on the Bad Roman podcast, visit thebadroman.com/ads. I'm so happy how this project has grown, and thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the conversation. One of the main reasons I started this podcast is because I wanted to talk to other people, because I'm still learning this as I go too. But you seem you seem like a very calm person, and like you can handle people with some tact. And I'm really kind of curious how you handle these folks.
That's funny. You can ask my wife. I'm so far behind on tact. It's no use for me to try and learn it.
Well, if you're far behind on tact, then I'm in horrible shape then, because I may never get right then.
We got to just figure out where people are at and what they want. And and one thing I try and keep in mind is I felt very alone and very angry for years and years and years.
Yeah, I totally feel that.
I still struggle with the anger, but at a certain point, I came to realize that the ones in the body of Christ who can see through the facade of the way the world looks and see reality behind it and think in those terms and operate in those terms is, I guess, what back in the day, what they would call the prophetic element of the church is about 3%. And a lot of them are so tired of trying and not getting anywhere, they just keep their mouth shut. They feel disenfranchised in the church. So they leave the church or they keep their mouth shut. So it's a very small minority of people who see anything but the way that it is and accept it as given. So when I find somebody else who sees a little deeper than surface reality, it's like, oh, good, we get to have a good conversation now. But for 97% of genuine believers, sweet people, they're giving, they're generous, they're raising their children right, they're um, doing the best they can with what they know. I'm just like, where are you at? How'd you get to where you are? And, what terms do you use to describe your faith? And then I have a place to work with. Like, and the big narrative, of course, we keep on. I feel like it's a Bermuda Triangle we keep getting sucked into, but is authority. To me, it's just another word for power. And to basically everybody that has power got it from God. So you see somebody with power, obviously they're on God's side. So to me, that just sounds like might equals right. Like the winner has God's blessing. And if you look at not just the gospel, but the Old Testament and the prophets' understanding and Mary's understanding, John the Baptist's understanding, and the disciples, the apostles' understanding of power, it does not look like winning at all. I mean, Jesus says, whoever loses their life will find it. Or if you lose houses and lands for my sake, you'll get it back in the kingdom with persecutions. It doesn't sound anything like, Joel Osteen's winning. um, it's a backwards idea of power. And even submission, when it says things like submit yourselves to each other, to the king, to husbands, submit yourselves to, and wives, submit yourselves to your husbands, slaves, submit yourselves to your masters. Like, let's start there. Like, nobody thinks slavery is a good idea. So why would a slave who had converted to following Christ, I mean, he has to submit to his master, doesn't he? That's like what a slave is. But basically, it's saying you are the one with the authority to live the way that your king shows you to live. So by your voluntary serving another human being, you're showing them Christ's love. They aren't the winner of this situation. It's a broken relationship. It ought not be this way. You oughtn't be in the situation you're in. They shouldn't be owning you. They shouldn't be treating you the way they are. But you're the one with the power, because the way that Christ's power works is through surrender. It's backwards. And then you just work your way back up the other way. Like, everybody knows that you're not supposed to have slaves, but everybody thinks that it's great to have kings. So you just work, if you use the same logic, it doesn't matter how many bombs they have, or how many goons they have, how much money they have, or how many followers they have. And Jesus said they're going to arrest you and bring you to the governors or the judges, the kings. And you're going to show up in handcuffs and open your mouth, and my words will come out. Don't even think about what you're going to say. I'm going to use you to get through to them. The kings and governors and judges aren't expecting to hear eternal truth, life-changing truth from somebody in handcuffs. They're my prisoner. They do what I tell them to. They can't move unless I let them. And Jesus basically said, let yourself be used in that situation. And being in handcuffs is part of submission to authority.
Yeah, I love that's awesome. I love the way you describe that, and we talk about that all the time too. Because when people bring up Romans 13 and when we're supposed to submit to governing authorities, and I think there's one very key word in that scripture is it says submit. It doesn't mean you're obeying. There's a reason why you're in handcuffs,
right?
Because of your disobedience. But you are submitting, and if people get sick of me using this example, I always use the example of Rosa Parks, the devout Christian. She was disobedient to some weird laws, some stupid laws, but she did submit
Right.
without violence, and it, to me, and it was proven over time too, especially with the early church. It was proven when you take that way of thinking and then it changes people's hearts, not just their minds, but it changes the way they see us because you're not acting out violently, and there's a great when we talk about pacifism quite a bit on the show as well, but I think his name is Justin Martyr. He's got there's a whole list of these quotes by the early church, and one of the things he says, how we gave up our weapons and turned them into plowshares, and he says, but the reason we're doing it is the more we are, and I want to use the word crucified, the more people are coming to believe Jesus Christ because of our actions. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously. And I love that he said that because when people are seeing just think about Martin Luther King and what they were doing, okay? They changed so much by not putting hands on the state.
Right.
You know what I mean? Now, they were working for voting rights and stuff, which, whatever. I mean, people, you know how I feel about voting.
Mm-hmm.
But just the very fact that they weren't putting their hands on the state to change things and not trying to work violently with the state. And it changed so much. But then again, you talk about being in handcuffs and slavery and stuff. I feel like when you can bring that up to people and be like, do you understand we're still tax slaves?
Right.
They're still stealing our money. They just expanded slavery. They
Right.
didn't really abolish it. They expanded it to everybody. Now we're all slaves. Is this like the Oprah Winfrey moment? Like, you're a slave, you get to be a slave. You know what I'm saying? So, and people don't really take that seriously enough. And that's what bothers me so much is because I've really had some awesome conversations. And I'll always end it with, it makes you wonder why people go and vote. Because all they're doing is bitching and complaining about the government.
Right.
Like, why are you going to talk to them every 2 to 4 years? Why are you going to put them back in power? You're complaining about them. They're stealing your money. They're taking that money and going and using it to kill people in other countries and kill people in this country. Stop voting. Stop encouraging the beast. Follow Jesus Christ. You say you're a Christian? Let's do it. Let's follow Jesus Christ.
Well, to go back to the principalities real quick. Like, we don't need that kind of power. And that's what, following Jesus' example, I'll give you all this, just worship me. And he's like, I worship just one, just the Lord your God. And he's the only one I'm going to worship. I don't need you to get that kind of power, and I don't want that kind of power. I've already got the kind of power I want. So by, submission, by putting ourselves in a humble way instead of grasping for power, we're testifying that Jesus defeated them. It says he led them captive. He made a mockery of them. He disarmed the rulers. It says, he's talking about in the unseen realm. We talk a lot about Jesus saving us from sin and saving us from hell. That's the two main things that I'd say American evangelical churches focus on, and that's all true. But there's so much more liberation, a much more well-rounded liberation involved that we've forgotten about. But Mary knew that the Messiah was going to save his people from their sins. The angel told her that, and that he was going to defeat the principalities and powers that have held human beings slaves for thousands and thousands of years. And she was really excited about that. And so I get excited about it, and I try and have that be an excited, contagious excitement that like we are being set free from death. Like we're going to be raised again like him. We're going to have a new body that's glorified. There's going to be a new heavens, new earth, and sin is defeated, hell is defeated, death is defeated, and the principalities and powers have been disarmed. We don't have a covetous bone in our body that we want that kind of power. They're losers. They're rebellious. They haven't bowed the knee or confessed with their tongue that Jesus Christ is Lord yet. They will someday. But like if we do it now, it says that we're the first fruits of that new world. We're the ones who first believed in Christ. We're first to declare him as Lord. And then everything else is going to come around one of these days. So their power is just transitory and illusory. And I get excited about that.
I think we should get excited about it. I love that because we should be, maybe that's the tact we need right there, is to be excited about what we know and telling other people about it. It's not the fact that we're saved from death, but there's real freedom in that when you understand that. Like if we talk about freedom all the time, we want to be free. We want to be left the hell alone. You know what I'm saying? We want our independence. And that only comes through Jesus Christ. It dang sure does not come through the state. Not one bit.
Well, he said, do not fear those who can kill the body but cannot kill the soul. He's saying, what's the worst they can do? Kill you? Like, if you don't have a fear of death, they got nothing on you.
Exactly. Nobody wants to die. Like, I'm not, when you say things like that, people are like, you're just sitting around waiting to die. No, I'm not waiting around to die. We got stuff to do. Now, when that time comes, whatever. I mean, as long as somebody is able to take care of my cats, that's all I'm worried about when something happens to me. I'm not leaving this world because, man, and we've seen it over the past 2 years for sure, that who wants to be a part of this world?
Most people.
Most people. That's
part
true.
of the problem is looking at the consequences of following Jesus. Oh no, everybody that followed Jesus got crucified and beheaded and rocks thrown at them and pulled apart and their heads chopped off and drowned and everything set on fire. It looks rough, and that's the fear of death. Like, do I want to turn my back on the world and follow Christ and suffer those consequences?
Well, I love what Paul said. He said to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord.
Also, what nobody's talking about is that there's severe consequences for compromising with the world and not following Christ. Like, they're defeated. The rulers are defeated. Their time's already over, and there's a new world, at hand or within you. Like, if you ally yourself with the defeated powers, if you compromise with them and say, yeah, I want a piece of that pie, just I don't want to get burnt at the stake or crucified, please. You're allying yourself with something that's already under judgment. So there's consequences either way. You can't skip the consequences. You just have to choose which ones sound worse.
Well, there's a couple points I want to touch on before I let you get out of here and get back to your family. But towards the end of your article, you said, if we identify ourselves by nation state or race or political party, pledging our allegiance to a nation and its flag, holding its military and worshipful regard, etc., we are telling Jesus that his kingdom of peace is not what we want. And that's such a strong statement, too, because I think you just were talking about that, too, because if we're pledging allegiance to the United States of America, to its flag, to its military, to the rulers of this kingdom, then we're telling Jesus, we don't want what you have to offer. And it's the same thing that happened in 1 Samuel 8.
Exactly.
When Israel demanded another king, and God was like, this is what you're going to get when you do that, when you reject me. And he said at the end, he said, he said, you're rejecting me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Think about that as a Christian. When you are going and pushing for political power or political candidate, you are rejecting Jesus Christ as your king.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing in 1 Samuel 8 as it was in the New Testament, as it is in 2022.
Mm-hmm.
It has not changed. You're rejecting God. You're rejecting Jesus Christ if you're going and pushing for a king, a ruler, other than the one that you already have, the best one we could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
Who only wants what's best for us. He's not stealing from us. He's not killing us. He just wants what's best for us. He wants us to live fruitful lives and live without fear. The state wants you to be afraid. That's how they keep their authority.
He also wants our whole selves. Like,
Yeah.
if we say I give my life to you, that means everything. Like all your money, all your time, and your family, and your land, and your house, and your body, and your mind, the thoughts you think and the words you say, everything is dedicated to the one that you say this is yours. And if we say I pledge allegiance, it doesn't just mean like I'm glad to be part of this club. Um, you know, I'm grateful for you guys not being worse tyrants than you possibly could be. It's saying like I'm giving myself and my resources, my heart, my thoughts are towards you, my adoration, my money, my time. If you need me to fight, I'll fight. Um, you tell me what to do, I'll do it. And that's the kind of stuff that we should be praying, like I give myself to you. I give you my thoughts. I give you my time. I give you my heart. And whatever you want me to do, I'll do it. So, yeah, it is. I feel like it's whatever part of us is still under the principalities and powers and allied with them is a part that isn't surrendered to Christ yet. And I don't know how to make that any more like an easier pill to swallow or, to be more tactful about it.
It is what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is. It really is what it is. And that's, being tactful and trying to be tactful. I just don't think that's part of my nature. And, I don't have anybody to blame but God. He created me this way. I'm just going to blame it on God for making me this way. That's my fallback on, and that's garbage, but you know what I'm saying? It is what it is. Jesus is king. We're Christians. Let's start behaving that way. Who is our king? Don't quit worrying about who's going to be the next president, who's going to be the next ruler over us. It doesn't matter. We already have one.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the best one possible, the very best one possible.
Also, when you were talking about Rosa Parks and then Martin Luther King and not going violent against the state, I really feel like those powers feed on negative energy. Like they get more powerful. They don't care if you love them or hate them. They probably prefer if you hate them because you throw all of this negative energy at them. And I feel like whatever violence you use or whatever hate you use, it's going to come be amplified and be returned to you. That's their game. You can't beat them at their own game. You just feed them.
Well, they only understand violence. Right. They only understand that. And so if you're reacting violently towards them, their violence increases.
And that's why Romans 12 says, love your enemies, feed your enemies. If your enemy's hungry, feed them. Don't return, evil for evil. And he was talking about Romans,
Yeah.
That is the passage before Romans 13 saying, if your enemy is hungry, feed them. They're not going to expect that.
We were talking to Alexander Christianopoulos about his book on Christian anarchism. We were talking about the state a little bit, and I told him, I said, when I use that term, the state, I'm not using it as a term of endearment. I'm using it as a pejorative. I'm making fun of them, and I told him, I said, it's really difficult. Jesus said, love your enemies. And the state is our enemy. Let's be real.
Right. And Paul and Peter knew that.
It's very difficult to love those people, and but I think that's a good example.
Right.
Feed them. That's how you change their minds. Give them some food. How much happier are people when they get to eat? And just stop harming them. So the last thing that when you ended this article, and by the way, this is a great article, folks. If y'all have not had a chance to read it, go to thebadroman.com and check out this article titled "The Dream of the City to Come. Do You Not Trust God?" But the very last sentence in this article is a quote, or is a scripture from Hebrews 13:14. I love this because you said, "Here we have no lasting city, but we seek the city that is to come." And you were talking earlier about getting excited, showing your excitement for that. And that's how we could change some minds. Let's talk about that just for a little bit.
Absolutely. I'm not even sure what it's going to look like. I'm not dogmatic on my eschatology. I think it's supposed to be a mystery, you know. That's why it says like seal up the words of the book. But I know that something really good is coming. And I grew up in a tradition where it's like always like dig a hole and climb inside with lots of food and ammunition, kind of, you know, like it's gonna be bad. I don't know, that's a paraphrase, but it is like how bad it's gonna be all the time, and you just have like this knot in your stomach about the future. But when I see all the promises about the new world that he's creating, is creating, and will create at the same time, it's like this is going to be really good. It says the former things will not be remembered or brought to mind. Like we won't even think about this trouble. Like it won't even pop into our heads.
That should be exciting to Christians.
It's awesome.
It is awesome, and it should be exciting to Christians, even because I love that, dude. Because we really should think about that more, because I love that, because it makes us wonder. We have this childlike wonderment when we're thinking about something like this, you know, and because we struggle so much with different things in this world, and just the idea that that stuff's going away at some point should excite us.
And so when we see him as he is, then we'll be like him.
Isn't that crazy?
And then, you know, we'll just be living in this new reality. And you know, some of the details, you know, are like hinted at here and there, but I like all the nations come to Zion, which is like the headquarters. I feel like, I don't know if it's a literal place or not, but they come to Jesus and say, teach us a new way to live. And it says, then the law goes out from Zion. This is in Micah and Isaiah, the same verbatim prophecy. The law goes out from Zion. They return to their homes, having learned Christ's law. And that's when they beat their swords into plowshares. It's like, all right, we're done doing things this way. Like that was really sick. We're learning a new way to live. So we can, you know, we can be the testimony to what Jesus has done and what Jesus will do by saying he is doing it. He's doing it in my life, you know, like I am, and we're, you know, imperfect representatives for sure. But it's pretty scary to think that, you know, people look at us and say, oh yeah, that's what Jesus is like. It's like, no, really, not really. But just to say, like, my life is being changed because I said I want to be part of your eternal project to change the world into what you want it to be. And I believe that your plan will ultimately be accomplished. It's inevitable. And that, you know, like the stone came and smashed the statue and it blew away into dust, and then the stone became a mountain that lasted forever. It's basically saying the destruction of this current state of things is inevitable, and the establishment of the eternal kingdom of Christ is inevitable. Like you don't have to wonder who's going to win. It's already done.
Yeah, that's so cool. That is so cool to even just to put that in that perspective and think about it that way. I don't know if we can do it on a daily basis, if it's possible to do it on a daily basis, but to think about this and keep that at our forefront, keep that in our mind's eye, to, you know, to remember there's something coming, and it's way better than what's going on right now. We need to tell everybody about it, and it's certainly not through the state. I keep stressing this so much with Christians. It's certainly not through the state.
And if he's made one family out of all, like a people that wasn't a people, out of every nation, tribe, and kindred and tongue and everything, then we have brothers and sisters that speak every language on earth and are under every nation state on planet earth, and we're one with them. We're one in Christ. We're part of what he's got going on. And so you know, you look at like, well, those people are bombing those people, and which one's the good guys and which one's the bad guys and which side am I on? It's like, I'm sure that I've got brothers and sisters on both sides that I'm one with. That's what I mean.
Yeah.
That's the reality for me.
That is something I've tried to be more intentional about myself, is when I look at another person, even if it's a stranger, if I don't know them, and if they're behaving in a way that's not that I don't agree with, but I still have to. But I still remember, God created that person too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that person is your brother or sister, even if they're, and then they could see me acting, behaving a certain way, like that guy calls himself a Christian, That's something I've always been afraid of. Is my biggest fear is being a stumbling block to somebody else. I try to be intentional about this very subject.
Yeah, it's a big challenge.
It's a big challenge, and just in keeping this no king but Christ, being very principled about it and very strict. I'm very strict about this topic, because you see Christians kind of wavering back, and we see it with, especially libertarians, they might get away from it and they go to like anarchism, and then all of a sudden there's, this new guy might be cool. He might get us what we need, more freedoms. And then they waver back into that garbage. To me, consistency is more of a statement to somebody that's watching you that you don't even realize they're watching you. If you're consistent in with this thing, Jesus is my king. Anyway, man, I really appreciate you taking the time to write for us. This is it's one of the coolest things about this project is the folks that come on and offer to write for us. It's something we started very early on, because I was talking to our producer about it. I said, because she wanted us to start a blog when we were first talking about doing a podcast. Like, a blog? Come on, man. I ain't got time to write. I ain't got time to do all that. But people offered to write in the beginning. I asked people to write in the beginning, and then I text her one night. I was at work. I was like, "Hey, why?" Because I got this idea from listening to the Scott Horton show. Because if you listen to a lot of the folks he's talking to, it's people that write for antiwar.com.
Mm-hmm.
And I texted, I was like, "Hey, why don't we just reach out and see if people want to write for us? That'll fill up our blog. That'll give something, something for people to read. People like to read rather than listen to Craig, I promise." So if we can give them that, and she goes, "That's a great idea." And that's what
it takes all kinds.
Oh, absolutely. That's what I love about the Bad Roman Project is the differing perspectives. I mean, if I just got behind a microphone and hollered at people every show, nobody's going to listen to that garbage. But I can get somebody like Jonathan on, who may see something a little different than I do. He's gonna reach somebody that I can't, and that's what's so important to me, is to be able to reach folks that I can't.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I love so much about Abby is her perspective, the way she sees things. I pick on her some because I tell her, I said, "You're the smartest person I know," and she hates that, but I'm going to continue to say it because I think she's the smartest person I know, because the way she can look at a topic and be very sweet about it, but she's very. I told her one time, I said, "You do this like this drive-by snark," and it's so funny the way she handles people, especially when you see her talking to folks online. Anyway, enough praise for Abby. We're going to talk about Jesus. Anyway, dude, I'm going to let you get out of here and get back to your family. Looks like you have a beautiful day behind you. But yeah, if you ever want to start selling your stuff, let us know. We'll plug you. If you got anything you want to plug, before I let you get out of here.
I don't really have any direction to point people, but I appreciate it.
All right, cool. So yeah, if y'all want to know more about Jonathan, go check out his article on thebadroman.com. He's got another article as well, and the title is escaping me. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but
that one's a message to warriors.
There it is. Yeah, and I want to get you back on to talk about that as well, because I think you were really thinking about a lot of things when you wrote that, and I think you touched on it a little bit here. But we'll get you back on. Maybe this time Abby won't be sick, and we can talk with her as well about that article, if you're interested in coming back on.
It sounds good.
Oh yeah, buddy. I really appreciate it. I like being able to talk. This is our first time really getting to have a conversation. We've talked some through messaging and online and stuff, but it's kind of cool to be able to see a person and have this conversation, because when we get done here, we got to go back out there in that world, and people are going to look at us sideways. Somebody asked me one time, "What are you doing with the Bad Roman Project?" I said, "We're turning people's worldviews upside down," and that's what we're trying to do. And I think it confuses folks, but I love it. I like to see the wheels turning in their brains, because they're going to come back later. It might be a month later, but they're going to come back and say something else to you. Then it starts a whole other conversation, because they're thinking. That's one thing I loved about Jesus, his tactics. He would respond with questions, and it made people walk away thinking. That's all we got to do is get people thinking, and we're going to change some stuff. All right, buddy. I'm going to let you get out of here and get back to your family, and we will talk soon. Thank you very much. All right. You as well.
Thanks for joining us this week on the Bad Roman Podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you find your podcasts to never miss an episode. And while you're at it, if you like what you heard, we'd appreciate a rating on iTunes. Or if you'd simply tell a friend about the show, it really helps people find us. 100% of donations are given to local charities in Memphis, Tennessee. To learn more about the Bad Roman Project and to find show notes, please visit thebadroman.com.